You know, everybody's very gluten sensitive now, or gluten aware, but the reality is that, you know, gluten sensitivity is a really specific genetic type of environmental type thing. I mean, you either have a genetic basis to your gluten sensitivity or not. Now, that doesn't mean that you might have a problem with gluten, but I would advance the notion that you might actually be, in fact, actually reacting to the lectin in wheat rather than to the gluten in wheat, because many of the people who actually do have improvements with gluten-free diets probably don't have the genetic basis for celiac disease or any other gluten, what's called the enteropathies, the diseases that are associated with gluten sensitivity. So they're not classically gluten sensitive, but they improve on a gluten-restricted diet. So where's the rub here? Well, it turns out that of the wheat that we consume, anywhere from 3 to 14% of the wheat, the protein is going to be comprised of the agglutinin, the lectin in wheat germ agglutinin. And the wheat germ agglutinin is a very profound stimulus to white blood cells. It can induce inflammation, particularly in type O. So we have a situation here where you could have, for instance, an increase in inflammation, an increase in joint pain. And a lot of people basically say that these things get better when they go wheat-free. And so the inevitable conclusion is, well, maybe it was the gluten, but the reality is that probably in more cases than the gluten, it's the lectin that they've been able to get out of the diet that made the difference. And so, you know, looking at it from that perspective, you can say to yourself, oh, why don't I just eliminate everything that I can and call it a day? And that's one way of intelligently doing this. And if you're very ill and impacted with sickness, you know, going tight on the diet to get the system to regenerate is an extremely wise move, at least initially. However, in some situations, you actually have to use a little bit of help. That ultimately, like I said before, these lectins that induce inflammation, they're specific for certain sugar molecules, and many of these sugar molecules are specific to your blood type. If we look at, for instance, these sugar molecules, we can find them in the chemical world, in natural sources, and actually design formulas for each blood type that actually put the sugar in a capsule so that any of the interacting elements, be they microbes or lectins or foods, interact directly with the supplement rather than with the digestive tract of the person. So that gave the imaginative name Deflect, just in the sense as if the supplement was actually deflecting the lectin away from the lining of the digestive tract. So almost like a cloaking shield if you're a Star Trek person, you know, an invisibility cloak. But the other side of the coin is if you look at it in like a typical real world kind of thing, if you can imagine a lectin is like a piece of Scotch tape, a piece of adhesive tape. And if you're unlucky enough to have a relative who smokes, there's probably an ashtray full of ash that you could use for our experiment. If not, just think about it in your mind. Think about the last ashtray you looked at, and take the Scotch tape and just run it through the ashtray. And you'll see after a while, the ash will adhere to the Scotch tape, and then you'll have a very unusable piece of Scotch tape. So if we look at what Deflect does, is it's working like the ash in the ashtray to flood the adhesiveness of the lectin so that the lectin can't attach to the other parts of your body, your digestive tract or your white blood cells or your red blood cells. So it's like actually doing it's actually considered what's called in medicine a sacrificial molecule. It's actually sacrificing itself to be able to block that attachment. And in the early stages of things where a person has to do some serious rerouting of their digestive tract and immune system, the product is really good at being able to get the digestive tract normalized really, really fast. Because remember, the whole lectin, immunological, blood type, digestive, bacteriological dysbiosis, it's a whole bouillabaisse. And if you just fix one, you may not have the others fall in line. Indeed, they may become even more elongated and out of whack. So the idea here is that by blocking these attachments, we're not only taking the bad foods out of the equation, but we're taking the bad microbes out of the equation as well. And so that's a sort of like a gardening effect on your own biological system, your own digestive tract. It's exerting a kind of cultivation effect. And each of the different Deflect formulas is just a formula of different basic sugars that are designed to act specifically for the type of Scotch tape that reacts with your ashtray ash.